scripture reading this morning comes from Exodus 3, verses 10 through 12, and 4, 1 through 17. So come, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" He said, "I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that it is I who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God on this mountain." Then Moses answered, "But suppose they don't believe me or listen to me, but say, 'The Lord did not appear to you.'" The Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" He said, "A staff." And he said, "Throw it on the ground." So he threw the staff on the ground, and it became a snake, and Moses drew back from it. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Reach out your hand and seize it by the tail." So he reached out his hand and grasped it, and it became a staff in his hand, so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you. Again, the Lord said to him, "Put your hand inside your cloak." He put his hand into his cloak, and when he took it out, his hand was leprous and white as snow. Then God said, "Put your hand back in your cloak." So he put his hand back in his cloak, and when he took it out, it was restored like the rest of his body. If they will not believe you or heed the first sign, then may they believe the second sign. If they do not believe either of these signs you shall take some of the water from the Nile and pour it onto the dry ground, and that water you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. But Moses said to the Lord, "My Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor even now that you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue." Then the Lord said to him, "Who gives speech to the mortals? Who makes the mute or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you are to speak." But he said, "My Lord, please send someone else." Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, "What of your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know that he can speak fluently. Even now he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, his heart will be glad. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth. And he will teach you what you shall do. He indeed shall speak for you to the people. He shall serve as your mouth for them, and you shall serve them as God for him. Take your hand, this staff, with which you shall perform these signs."
I can't do this. Those are my words to God in prayer on my very first mission trip. I can't do this. I was young. I had just completed the 8th grade, and I found myself with my pastor and my youth pastor and some people from my church at a small church in the suburbs outside of Chicago. We were there to teach vacation Bible school, but that wasn't my problem, as I found myself pleading with my Creator at the edge of my cot in the fellowship hall while everyone else snored around me. My problem was with music. This church was different than any other church I had ever been to. Everything they did was in song. They prayed in song. The pastor frequently preached by singing, and they were constantly asking our mission team to join us as they served, taught, and shared the gospel through music. There was just one problem with that. I couldn't sing. I couldn't play music, and I was tone deaf. Now, this is not a term that I came to on my own. It was a term that had been assigned to me over and over again. I heard it when I tried out for middle school band and was subsequently told, "No," in a nice way. "No, Rob, it's not for you." I still think it's weird that if you were tone deaf at my middle school, you couldn't be in the band. That meant that you got to be in piano lessons instead. It just seems like a punishment to me. And so I had to be in piano lessons every single year that I was in middle school. And again, after failing most every piano lesson test, I was told nicely by the piano lessons instructor, "Rob, I think you might be tone deaf because you can't hear the difference between the notes." I did convince him to let me write essays about composers so that I could bring my grade up. I still have locked into my head way too much information about composers. And so as I finished middle school, I was excited that I didn't have to deal with that anymore until I went on this mission trip and found that no matter what I did or where I went, I was being asked to do exactly that. And their pastor noticed that I kind of hung back and didn't sing with them. And I think he made it his personal mission to try to get me out front. This church didn't understand that musical theater and church are not the same thing. They don't have to be, but they sang everything they did. I deep down really felt that if I sang, I would wreck their worship, that I would mess up how they were serving other people, that I would break something holy. That's what I thought. And so I prayed to God, "God, I can't do this. You know I can't do this. You made me this way. If you need me to sing and do all these things with this church, then please make me able." Amen. Now I woke the next morning feeling like there was something on my throat, like I had this rasp when I spoke. And I still feel that way. And as odd as it sounds, and believe me, it is much odder to experience, when the time came for me to sing alongside that church and my mission team, I was able. I could. When I heard the notes being played for the first time in my life, they didn't all sound the same. Something happened. Now, I'll be honest with you, God didn't make me real good and the best singer ever, but He made me able. And I was thankful to God, and I told Him so. And I thought that that was all. I thought that that miraculous gift was a one-time thing, needed only for that mission trip and those people in that church. I had no idea that God wasn't done and what God would do with me through that simple, miraculous gift. When I got home, I was surprised that my throat still felt the same way. I thought it would go away when I got back off the airplane. I was surprised I could still hear music differently. So I taught myself how to play guitar, and I played in a band, doing things I always dreamed of doing, but never thought I'd be able to. And I admit to you and to God that I had no intention of using the guitar for Jesus. That never crossed my mind. Yet in college, my first job in a church came because I could play guitar and because I taught myself in such a way that I could teach others how to play as well. I remember being interviewed for a youth ministry job, and I imagine Stephanie knows what that's like. And I told myself in my head what I was going to be asked, but I was not asked a question about my Bible knowledge or about my church membership or about my personal theology. I was only asked one question. Are you in a band? Not what I expected. And so I turned to the youth minister and I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she grabbed my arm and ran me upstairs to their youth suite. She says, "I have to show you something." Upstairs in their youth suite was a stage. There were guitars and basses. They had an acoustic drum set. They had an electric drum set. They had a 30-channel mixing board and a PA system. She said, "Somebody donated that to our youth, and we need somebody else to teach them how to do that for Jesus. And we think that's you." So there began my work and my life in ministry. Youth band practice shortly turned to Sunday school teaching. Guitar lessons became opportunities for pastoral care. Songwriting with students became opportunities for Bible study and discussions of theology. And it was through this experience that I began to see that God had called me to serve youth And as I did that, I began to see that God had called me to serve you. All because of a simple gift that seemed totally unrelated to what I am doing now. And when I look back, I see that when God calls you, God overrides your excuses. I love that word. God doesn't respond to your excuses or listen to them and give you another way. No, He just overrides them completely, giving you what you need to answer that call. I learned that it's not a one-time thing. And I see that the ways that God intends for all of us to use the call are always bigger than we realize. That often only after we've answered the call and look back that we see God's hands all over the process. These are the same lessons that Moses learned as he stood staring at the impossible. Standing barefoot, staring at a bush that was on fire but wouldn't burn up. Where he heard for the first time God's call on his life. Where he told God, I can't do this. And where God overrode his excuses and his fears with powerful gifts and assurances. God's call to Moses began with an invitation. Like I told the children this morning, when God calls, God doesn't say hello. God says, come or go. An invitation to come, and I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people out of slavery in Egypt. This was not an invitation that Moses wanted. It was not something he thought he was important enough to do. And it's not an invitation that he believed he was capable of doing. And he made sure to tell God so, over and over again, offering God all of what he felt were legitimate reasons for God to choose to call somebody else. Who am I, Moses says, to go and do that? What if they don't believe me? I'm not a good speaker. Please choose somebody else. What Moses shows us here is something we don't often talk about when we discuss God's call on our lives. A vital part of the calling experience that I believe must be stated, especially on days like today, where we recognize and commission Stephanie as she seeks to answer God's call in her life. What we fail to mention, what we sidestep around, is the fact that often a true call from God is something hard. Something scary and risky. Something that we don't feel adequately equipped to do. We prefer to talk about answering a call from God in terms of obedience and in terms of being a part of the ministry of Christ. And while those things are true and sound pretty, what's also true is that answering a call from God is going to cost you something. And if it's a call to ministry, to full-time ministry, it's going to cost you everything. For Moses, answering this call meant going back to the one place on earth he was afraid to go to talk to the one man he didn't want to see. When Moses was born, the Pharaoh in Egypt wanted to kill him, and so he escaped in a basket. When Moses left the last time he was there, he left because the Pharaoh in Egypt wanted to kill him. And of all the places and all the people that God could be calling Moses to do and talk to and be at, he's calling him to go to Egypt, a place that for Moses is synonymous with death, to talk to the one man that makes that death happen. That's what it cost him. Moses knows that if he answers that call, every single plan that he made for his life, every hope that he might have had for his children and his wife are over. It's no wonder that he doesn't feel ready or good enough. It's no wonder that he wants God to choose somebody else. And Moses is far from alone. When you look at every single person that God calls in the Bible, all but a select few, and I can count them on one hand, answer the same way that Moses does. Isaiah says that his lips are too unclean to share the words of God. Jeremiah says he is too young. Peter says he is too sinful. Jonah runs in the opposite direction. And Jesus, even Jesus, turns to God and asks if there might be some other way as he sits and prays in the Garden of Gethsemane. The truth is, when God calls you, you're probably not going to feel ready, and you aren't ready. Not without God's help. We have to realize that God never calls us in a vacuum. God doesn't send us out on our own to do these things by ourselves and alone. God calls you and God gives you what you need. God hears all your reasons why you can't. All the things you think are legitimate. And God overrides all of them with blessings. That's what happens to Moses. I want you to look at the words Moses offers to God and how God responds. Moses says, "Who am I to be able to go?" God says, "I will be with you." So it ain't about who you are. Moses says, "I can't speak well." God says, "You don't have to. I'm going to talk for you and your brother will too." Moses says, "What if they don't believe me?" God says, "Let me show you something. Take your stick that's in your hand and throw it on the ground." Moses does, and he jumps back as he sees that stick turn into a snake. God says, "Pick it back up." And as Moses grabs it by the tail, it turns back into a staff again. This is not some random stick. This is something he's been carrying around for a while. If it could do this before that moment, he'd have seen it before. God says, if they don't believe you after that, let me show you something else. Put your hand in your robe. So Moses does. And he pulls it out and he's horrified because his hand is white and diseased. God says, "Put it back. Pull it out again." So he does, and it's restored. God says, if they don't believe the first sign or the second, I'll give you one more. Go down to the Nile, grab some water, pour it on the ground in front of them, and it's going to turn into blood. Now Moses hears these things, and he hears God saying, "Trust me. Believe me, they're going to recognize it's me that's sending you when they see that." But Moses believes way smaller than what God intends for these miracles. Moses thinks that God is going to make him do these things for the elders of the people so that they will believe, and God will do that. The first time Moses performs these miracles outside of the burning bush will be for the church leaders. And Moses thinks that that's really all they're for. He's given no indication that God's got bigger plans for these gifts. And God does. Think about all of the gifts that God has given to him. He has no idea that these wonders are going to be used in bigger ways, not just in front of the leaders, but in front of the Pharaoh, in front of all of Egypt. That staff is going to be transformed into a snake again, and it's going to eat the other staff snakes of all the magicians of the Pharaoh right in front of him. And it's going to begin a series of plagues that will eventually set God's people free. Moses will again cause disease with his hand, but it won't be his own hand that will be diseased. In the 6th plague over Egypt, Moses will throw soot in the air, and everyone in Egypt will look the way his hand did on that mountain. Moses hears God say, you can take a pitcher of water and put it on the ground, and it will turn into blood on the ground, and he has no idea that God's got bigger plans for that miracle. That it's going to involve not just one pitcher of water, but every single pitcher of water, every basin of water, every cistern, every spring and well, and the entire Nile River will be turned into blood. Moses will learn the same lesson that I did when God made me able to sing on that mission trip. That when God gives us an ability, God's got bigger plans for it than we can imagine. Plans that point not to us, but to God. Assurances that God is really calling us and that God is really with us. But the most powerful assurance that God gives to Moses and to each of us is not staff snakes or diseased hands or even water to blood. It's the assurance that he gives him the moment he's first called. God calls this assurance a sign. When Moses says, "Who am I that I should go to the Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" God says, "I'll be with you, and this shall be a sign for you that it's I who sent you. When you've brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship me on this mountain." In other words, when it's all over, when you've done what I've asked you to do, and you look back and see how it all came to be, you're going to know that it was I who sent you. You'll see that every step of the way, it was I who lifted you up. Now, this is probably hard for Moses to hear at the time. It's certainly hard for us to hear. We want assurances now, not after we've done what God's asked us to do. Yet when Moses did come back to that mountain, after freeing all of God's people, it is that assurance that's going to remain the most real and important in his life. As he looks back and sees that firsthand, after everything, God did exactly what he said he would do. You think about Moses' relationship with God after that moment. After he gets back to that mountain, after he frees the people, he's about to go for 40 years listening to those same people whine and complain as he delivers them to the promised land. And I guarantee you, he would not be able to do that if it wasn't for the realization that God keeps his promises. If it wasn't from what he learned when he stood on that mountain and recognized that sign. That's what I hope for us. That's what I hope for those who seek to serve and live as God is calling. Who find ourselves doubting that we're good enough or able enough to be the people that God made us to be. That one day we too will look back from the mountain and see God's hand in all that's happened. And that is what I hope for Stephanie. As we commission her to her new role as resident chaplain at NC Memorial Hospital. That she'll use the gifts that God gave to her. Gifts that God gave her to use in this place for our youth and for each of us. And realize that God's not done with those gifts. And is going to multiply them in powerful ways that she can't imagine. My hope is that she'll begin to see those things as she cares for the families and the patients and the staff at the hospital. My hope is that Stephanie will see that even when she doesn't feel good enough, or capable enough, or equipped enough, which is probably going to happen, that God is not sending you out by yourself, and that God is giving you all you need to do and be who God made you to be. It's my hope that as we lay hands on Reverend Bohannon and bless her, that she'll feel God's blessing on her life and on her ministry. And my greatest hope is that when you look back years from now on your experience, as you stand on the mountain and peer back at what has happened and where your life has gone and where your calling has ended up, that you will see God's hands in all of it. From the small things that you thought were only to be used one time, that began to be something big and amazing. Now, I want to conclude this morning by sharing something with you. Something that I didn't learn from Scripture, but that I learned from one of the youth that I served. I was a youth minister for a long time, and I love teenagers just as we have watched you love our teenagers. And I recognize, and I'm sure you recognize, that oftentimes their wisdom and their faith and their questions teach us more than our professors ever hoped to. So I want to share with you a song written by one of the youth I served at that very first church. This was a youth that would have never been a part of our youth band had it not been for God making me able. He was a drummer. I thought it was weird that he came in that day and he grabbed my guitar, because that's not what drummers do. And he walked up and he said, "Rob, I've got something I want to play for you." And it's been something that I've taken with me to every church I've served. I've sung it at every church that I've served. I've brought it with me on mission trips because it's something that I hold on to that reminds me that it's not about what I can do, but it's about how God can lift me up as I go and serve. So I want to share that song with you. Welcome to infinity. It's been a long road. We're here to stay now. Make yourself at home. Take a look around you. Look at all you see. Isn't it so wonderful to have a loving King? Lord, lift me up. Lord, lift me up. Hallelujah. Lord, lift me up. The most. Blessed is the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Every time I turn to you, you answered my call. Your faithful, humble servant, I stand straight and tall. Lord, lift me up. Lord, lift me up. Hallelujah. Lord, lift me up. Amen. I talked to that youth many years later. Leona got to meet him when he was in his 20s. And he asked me, he says, "You remember that song?" I said, "Yeah." So I remember that song, and I have taught that song to hundreds of people because your words in that moment matter that much to me. That's my hope for you. And my hope for all of you, that you recognize that God is calling you. May you hear that call, and may you accept the blessings that God is providing you to answer it. May you look back at all that God has done through you and see God's hand lifting you up when you didn't feel able, when you didn't feel eloquent, when you didn't feel good enough. May you know what Moses learned and what I have learned again and again throughout my life, that God was and is and always will be with you. Amen.